Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert, the podcast where we talk about growth, mindset, culture, and all the things we're all pretending we have figured out, but absolutely do not. Today's episode is going to be, a little different because we're not reacting to the chaos of the world or dissecting these crazy pop culture politics moments that didn't necessarily need to happen. We're talking about 3 books that quietly, and then not so quietly, rewired how I think about people, possibility, and money. And before we do, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, what is he wearing? This is my my leopard print New Year's Eve pajama set. There are pants that match. Don't worry, I'm wearing them. But I only wore it for a brief time on New Year's Eve, and I was like, I should be wearing this again. Like, why not? And I wanted to put something comfy on. So I am wearing a satin silk pajama set. Silk pajama set. Yeah, that's right. And now, before anyone panics, this is not a self-help episode where I tell you to wake up at 5 a.m., drink celery juice, or just think positive, and that's how you'll figure your way out of systemic issues. This is more like a real-life report from the field. I read these books over the last year or so because I was tired of overthinking, tired of managing other people's emotions, tired of feeling weird about wanting more, and tired of rehearsing worst case scenarios like it was a hobby. And I did actually read these books. So don't come for me. You know who you are. The 3 books that we're talking about today are The Let Them Theory, which I've talked about before, The Secret, which I've read a million years ago and continue to reread when I need a refresh, and You're a Badass at Making Money. On the surface, they feel very different. One is about boundaries, one is about mindset, and one is about money. But together, they formed this unexpected trifecta that helped me loosen my grip, reframe my expectations, and stop playing small in ways I didn't even realize that I was doing. Again, I'm not here to sell you a morning routine or tell you that these books are going to fix your life. They didn't fix mine. Nothing is going to fix mine, okay? What they did was give me better questions, better awareness, and a little more peace where there used to be a lot of noise. So in this episode, I'm breaking down what actually stuck, what surprised me, what felt uncomfortable, and how I've applied these ideas in real life, like in dating, in work, in money, and all the messy stuff in between. And as always, if you're not following me on Instagram and TikTok, follow me at _hotairpod. Head over to my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to submit your listener stories, topic suggestions, and shop my merch. So in this episode, take what works, leave what doesn't, and if nothing else, let this be permission to stop arguing with reality, stop predicting disaster, and stop pretending you don't want the things that you want. So let's hit it. Part 1, the Let Them Theory. The first thing that I will say about the Let Them Theory is that it sounds fake, or at least like something that you would see printed in aggressive cursive on a throw pillow at Home Goods. Let them. You're supposed to sleep on that? What? 2 words. That's it. No footnotes, no flowchart, no 12-step program, just a sentence that feels way too small to be useful when your brain is spiraling at midnight because someone watched your Instagram story but did not text you back. We all know what that feels like. And yet, somehow those 2 words ended up changing the way I move through relationships, through work, through money, through expectations, and honestly, my own nervous system. I found this book at a moment when I was deeply tired of myself, not in a self-loathing way, but in a why am I doing this again type of way. I was exhausted from caring more than other people cared about me, from trying to manage outcomes, from rehearsing conversations that never happened, and from giving way too much emotional energy to situations that were giving me very little in return. I had become the manager of other people's moods, reactions, misunderstandings, and silence. And the worst part? I thought that made me mature. I thought it made me emotionally evolved. And in reality, it just made me anxious. The core idea of the Let Them Theory, which was popularized by Mel Robbins, is pretty simple. When someone does something you don't like, that you don't agree with or don't understand, let them. Let them think what they think. Let them act how they act. Let them show you who they are. Then, and this is the part that people forget, you decide what to do next. Mel Robbins has said in interviews, let them be wrong about you. That sentence alone feels like a nervous system release because how much of our anxiety comes from trying to correct perceptions that are not actually ours to manage? What this book helped me see is that most of my stress wasn't coming from other people's behavior. It was coming from my resistance to it. I didn't just notice inconsistency, I fought it. I didn't just observe distance, I tried to close it. And I didn't just clock disappointment, I tried to reframe it into something palatable so I wouldn't have to feel it. The let them theory doesn't ask you to approve of bad behavior, it asks you to stop negotiating with reality. Psychologically, this works because it shifts your locus of control back where it belongs. When you're constantly focused on why someone did something, what they meant by it, or how to get them to change, you're outsourcing your emotional regulation. You're living in reaction mode. Let them cuts that loop. It says that's their choice. And once you accept that, your body calms down. Your mind stops racing. You're no longer bracing for impact every time someone else makes a move that you cannot predict. One of the most powerful things that Mel Robbins talks about is the idea that boundaries are not about controlling others. And you know me, I love a boundary, and I've said this many, many, many times. In one interview, she said, boundaries are about what you do. That completely reframed things for me, and that's what I live by now. I used to think that boundaries were something that you announced, something you explained, something you defended, but let them showed me that boundaries can be very quiet. They can be invisible. They can look like disengaging or redirecting or simply not over-investigating where there is no return. Dating is where this theory really slapped me across the face, like a big old bitch slap. I'm someone who historically will give the benefit of the doubt so hard. It should be an Olympic sport and I would get a gold medal every time. If someone was inconsistent, I assume they were busy. If someone was vague, I assume they were nervous. If someone pulled back, I assume they were processing or that I was too much. And to be fair, sometimes that's true. But let them taught me that explanations don't actually change the impact. Someone can have the best intentions in the world and still not be showing up in a way that works for you. Letting them means you stop trying to extract clarity from confusion. I started practicing this in very small ways. If someone didn't respond, I didn't follow up to, keep the vibe alive. I let the silence be information. If plans were always tentative, I stopped anchoring my schedule around them. If effort felt one-sided, I stopped balancing it out with extra enthusiasm. And what surprised me most is that this didn't make me colder, it made me calmer. I wasn't constantly scanning for signs. I wasn't reading tone into punctuation. I wasn't making up stories to soothe my own discomfort. I was just observing behavior and responding accordingly, which sounds a lot easier said than done. There's also a deep self-respect component here that I did not expect. Let them subtly asks, why do you need this to be different? Sometimes the answer is reasonable. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's just loneliness. When you stop intervening, you actually get to see your own patterns more clearly. You see where you are over-functioning. You see where you're chasing, which we are all very guilty of chasing. You see where you're abandoning yourself in the name of being understanding and probably in the name of being likable. From a psychological standpoint, this ties directly into nervous system regulation. When you're constantly monitoring other people, your body stays in a low-level fight or flight state. You're anticipating disappointment, you're bracing for rejection. Let them gives your system permission to just stand the fuck down. You don't have to be on alert if you're not trying to control the outcome of everything. You can just exist, and that's not nothing, that is healing. Another place this theory hits hard was work and creative projects. I care deeply about what I make, whether it's art or the podcast or music, sometimes too deeply. I used to take the lack of response or engagement very personally. If someone didn't get back to me, I assumed I'd done something wrong. If something didn't land that I put out there, I overanalyzed it. Let them help me separate effort from outcome. I can show up fully, I can do my best, and then I can let people receive it however they want to receive it. This really showed up when I do art festivals and I don't sell a single piece of art. And then other times I'll sell a shitload. I take it personally. I'm like, nobody likes my art. What am I doing? What is my purpose on the earth? But I then chose to let them love it or let them hate it. Mel Robbins has said, you are not responsible for how others feel. That doesn't mean you act without care. It means you stop carrying responsibility that was never yours. One of the biggest misconceptions about the let them theory is that it's passive or dismissive. And personally, I don't think it is. It's discerning. It's about choosing where your energy goes instead of letting it just leak everywhere. It doesn't mean you never address issues. It means you don't chase clarity from people who are not offering it freely. And it means that you don't argue with behavior. You take it at face value. You don't just let people walk all over you all the time. That's where it comes in when it's like, let them, let me, I'll figure out what to do so these bitches ain't walking all over me anymore. I also noticed how this theory exposed my need for reassurance. There were moments where I realized I wasn't actually upset about what somebody did. I was upset that it triggered a story about my worth. Let them doesn't fix that automatically, but it does kind of interrupt the pattern. It gives you a pause. And in that pause, you can ask, is this about them or is it about me? And that question alone is very powerful. What I appreciate most about this book is that it's not about becoming detached. It's about becoming grounded. It's about being present with what is instead of constantly negotiating with what you wish were different. It's about trusting that you don't need to force alignment. If it's there, it will show itself. If it's not, that will show up too. I've started using let them as a quiet mantra, not out loud, not dramatically, just internally. Someone cancels last minute, let them. Someone doesn't reciprocate effort, let them. Someone misunderstands me, let them. And then I decide what access they get. And usually it's not a lot more access. I decide what energy I give and what stories I stop telling myself. Mel Robbins has also said, peace comes from accepting what is. And as annoying as that sounds, it's true. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It just means clarity, and clarity is kind and kind of badass. This book did not make my life perfect. No book ever will. I still care. I still feel. I still have moments where I want to grab the emotional steering wheel and yank it back and to the left off a bridge into my favor because I just can't handle it anymore. But now I notice it. I got heated there. And more often than not, I choose differently. I choose myself. I try to choose calm, and I choose not to chase closure that won't actually close anything. Let them is not about giving up. It's about giving back the responsibility that never belonged to you. And once you do that, you realize how much lighter everything feels. Part 2, the secret. If the let them theory helped me stop gripping so tightly to other people, the secret forced me to look at how tightly I'd been gripping my own fear. And before you roll your eyes or picture me burning sage while whispering affirmations into a crystal, let me say this up front. I do that sometimes, but I was also skeptical of the secret, like deeply. I lumped the secret into the category of things that feel one step away from telling you to just think positive while the world and your apartment building is on fire. But I didn't come to this book from a place of blind optimism. I came to it from burnout, frustration, and a quiet realization that my inner dialogue had become incredibly hostile towards my own future. And let me just say this. I read The Secret, it was 14 years ago for the first time. And back then, I wasn't jaded. I was also naive and young and anything was possible. I still feel that way, but we all know as we age, those types of feelings kind of fade. So when I read it the first time, I really did find it very helpful. And as I'm getting older, every once in a while, maybe once a year, I'll come back to it and I will reread it. So my explanation and kind of review of it now is now, not me 14 years ago when I was, not jaded and didn't think the world was out to get me. So what surprised me the most is that The Secret isn't really about magic. It is about attention. It's about where your focus goes what you rehearse mentally, and how often you unconsciously expect things to go wrong. Rhonda Byrne, the author, has said in interviews, "What you focus on, you attract." That line gets mocked a lot, but psychologically, it's not that wild. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It looks for evidence to support whatever story you're telling yourself. If your internal narrative is, "This never works out for me," your brain will work overtime to prove that right, and it will never work out for you. The concept at the heart of The Secret is the law of attraction, which says that like attracts like. Now, taken literally, that can sound pretty absurd. But when you strip away the mystical packaging, what's left is actually grounded in cognitive psychology. Your thoughts influence your emotions influence your behavior, and your behavior influences your outcome. The book isn't saying you can sit on your couch and manifest a new life without action. It's saying that action fueled by belief looks very different from action fueled by fear. Before rereading this book recently, my default expectation was neutrality at its best and disappointment at its worst. Even when good things happen, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd say things like, "This is probably temporary," or "I'll believe it when I see it." I thought I was being realistic, which I don't love being realistic. What I was actually doing was training my brain to anticipate loss instead of possibility. The Secret made me confront how often I was rehearsing failure in advance, calling it preparedness. One of the ideas that Rhonda Byrne emphasizes is gratitude as a frequency shifter. She has said that gratitude changes everything. And again, that sounds cheesy, but gratitude has been studied extensively, and it consistently shows reductions in anxiety and increases in overall well-being. When you practice gratitude, you're not denying reality, you are widening it. You're telling your brain there is more than just what's missing. And once I started doing that, something subtle shifted. I wasn't suddenly winning the lottery, but I was noticing opportunities instead of dismissing them. The biggest misunderstanding about The Secret is that people think it's about bypassing hard feelings, and it's not. It's about not living in them. There's a difference between acknowledging fear and then letting it narrate your entire future. I used to visualize worst case scenarios as a form of emotional armor. If I imagined disappointment first, I thought maybe it would hurt less when it arrived. What The Secret challenged me to do was imagine success with the same intensity that I imagined failure. And that was very uncomfortable at first, and hope can feel more vulnerable than pessimism. And I'm not generally a pessimistic person. These are like far and few between situations in which I catch myself like living in fear. But in general, I am someone who thinks anything is possible. And I hope to take that with me. But there are moments when I'm like, I really need to re-up. I need to revisit this. I need to get back on my positivity and back on my visualization and appreciation. And then there's other times when I just fall into that dark pit of despair. So psychologically, visualization works because the brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined experiences and real ones. And athletes use this all the time. I find this so interesting. When you repeatedly picture yourself succeeding, your brain starts building familiarity with that outcome. And I watched something a very long time ago about athletes being hooked up to all these machines. And when they close their eyes and they envision themselves doing their sport, whatever sport it was, there was these neurons firing, or I don't even know if they were neurons, don't take my word for that, but the same muscles were firing as if they were doing the actual movement. So again, when you repeatedly picture yourself succeeding, your brain starts building familiarity with that outcome. It doesn't guarantee success, but it increases confidence, motivation, and persistence. Byrne has said, "See yourself living in abundance and you will attract it." I translated that into something more grounded. Act like someone who believes that things can work out. Walk the walk, talk the talk. So I started again experimenting with this in small, non-dramatic ways. Instead of assuming that a project would flop, I visualized it being well received. Instead of bracing for rejection, I imagined just a sense of ease. Instead of telling myself this is a long shot, I asked, what if this works? And no, everything didn't magically align overnight, But my energy definitely changed. I showed up differently. I followed through more confidently. I stopped sabotaging opportunities before they had a chance to unfold, which is probably the whole reason that I even started Hot Air. Because I spent a long time living in this, what if nobody listens? What if I sound like an idiot? Like I don't know what I'm talking about. What if nobody wants to listen to me sit here by myself in my bedroom, like on hours and hours and hours on end? And now, my friends, I'm in the top 10% of all podcasts in the world. I'm going to say that every episode. Just so it's like, shifting that mindset. Like, what if it actually works out? What if people do like what I have to say? What if I'm sharing knowledge that inspires even just one human? Like more of a what if and a why not, as opposed to, oh, it'll never be. One thing that I appreciate about The Secret is its emphasis on responsibility, and that part gets overlooked. Byrne talks about how you are responsible for the energy that you bring into situations, not in a blame yourself way, but in an empowerment way. When you realize your thoughts are shaping your experience, you also realize that you have agency. That was huge for me. It pulled me out of this victim mode. It reminded me that I was not stuck. I was just rehearsing the same story over and over and over again in so many ways. Like telling yourself, oh, I don't like waking up in the morning, or, oh, I never get a good sleep, or I'm really bad with money, which we're going to talk about soon, or I'm terrible at dating and nobody likes me. Like these are just things we tell ourselves that more often than not are not even factual. So yes, now let's talk about money. Money was another area where this book exposed some uncomfortable truths. I had a lot of subconscious beliefs about scarcity, instability, and waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I still do, and I am still working on them. I didn't trust good financial moments to even last. The Secret forced me to notice how often I talked about money with tension or in a joking way or self-deprecation. Byrne says, feel rich now. I didn't take that literally. I took it emotionally. I started acting like money was something that I could manage, not something that constantly slipped through my fingers. And listen, critics of The Secret often say it ignores structural issues and privilege. And they're not wrong. Positive thinking doesn't erase systemic barriers, but what it can do is stop you from internalizing them as personal failure. The book works best when it's used as a mindset tool, not like a moral judgment. It's not saying bad things happen because you didn't think happy enough thoughts. It's saying your internal environment matters more than you realize. And I also want to be honest about where this book didn't work for me. There were moments where it felt overly simplistic. There were times when life was genuinely hard and no amount of visualization was going to change that immediately. But even then, it gave me something valuable. It gave me a pause. I think that's kind of a through note here for this episode. Just a good pause sometimes is all you need. Instead of spiraling, I could ask myself, what am I expecting right now? And often, just changing that expectation softened the entire experience. What I learned from The Secret is that optimism isn't delusion. It's a strategy. It's choosing a mental framework that supports forward movement instead of paralysis. It's understanding that your thoughts are not neutral background noise. They're instructions that your brain is constantly following. I don't walk around pretending that everything is perfect. Quite frankly, I've spent most of today very anxious and irritable just based on outside factors, and I still have doubts. I still have fear. Now I notice when my inner dialogue starts predicting doom, and I gently try my best to redirect it. Again, not always successfully, but just being aware is a good start. I remind myself that anticipation shapes experience, and that alone has changed how I move through the world. The Secret didn't teach me how to control life. It taught me how to stop arguing with possibility. And once I did that, things didn't just feel lighter, they felt more open. Part 3. You're a badass at making money. If the let them theory helped me release control over other people, and The Secret helped me stop rehearsing for failure, You're a Badass at Making Money came in and said, cool, now let's talk about the thing you've been quietly terrified to look at directly. Money. Not numbers, not spreadsheets, not budgets, identity, worth, and shame. All inherited beliefs. The stories we absorb without realizing that they're stories. This book didn't make me rich overnight, but it did something far more disruptive. It exposed how emotionally loaded my relationship with money actually was. Author Jen Sincero's tone is unapologetic. It's playful and occasionally confrontational, which is probably why it worked for me. I laughed so much reading this. She does not tiptoe around the fact that most people have deeply ingrained money blocks. In interviews, she said, "Your attitude towards money is a mirror of how you value yourself." And that hit uncomfortably close to home because when I really looked at my habits, I realized I was oscillating between wanting abundance and feeling guilty for wanting it. I liked the idea of financial freedom, but I was suspicious of people who openly pursued it. That contradiction was doing more damage than I realized. And I know exactly where it came from. Not to throw my mother under the bus, but I'm about to throw my mother under the bus. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But she has always been like, "Oh, dude, like when I got a new car, she's like, "Oh, but your car is like good. Are you sure you need a new car? Like I thought you liked your car." And it's like, I just wanted something nicer for myself. I wanted to drive around being proud of the car that I was in. I'm moving apartments right now from a small 1 bedroom to a twice the size 2 bedroom, 2 bath, all on my own. Major upgrade in life. And, she was like, "Oh no, are you going to be putting yourself in a stressful situation? I thought you loved your apartment. How come you want to move?" And it's like, just because you like something doesn't mean you can't want more for yourself, which often requires more money. And she always would say, "Well, money doesn't grow on trees." Well, money doesn't grow on trees. And then, when I would show her nice things that I bought or say, "I'm going on a trip to Tokyo," it's always, "Well, aren't you fancy pants?" And she doesn't mean it in a negative way, but it's in a way where it's like unattainable, where it like, because I want nice things and I do nice things and I treat myself to these experiences, that it's like, I almost don't deserve them kind of vibes. And I know she doesn't mean it that way because she has her own relationship with money. But truth be told, I make more than my parents ever have. And granted, that was a gazillion years ago when they were working full time. But my relationship with money is vastly different as I have evolved and changed it over time and tried to unlearn the habits that we all learn from our parents. Which brings me into this next section because the psychological foundation of this book is built on subconscious belief systems. From a young age, we absorb messages about money from our families, from culture, and environment. We think that money is stressful. Money causes conflict. Money changes people. Or, on the flip side, money is hard to come by and wanting more makes you greedy. These beliefs live quietly in the background and influence how much we think we're allowed to earn and keep and enjoy. Sincero writes about this extensively, often pointing out that you can't out-earn your self-concept. If you don't believe you're worthy of abundance, you'll unconsciously sabotage it. Before reading this book, I noticed I was very comfortable working hard, but deeply uncomfortable receiving. Whether that was compliments, opportunities, money, there was always a reflex to downplay or deflect. And there still is. I won't even lie. I tell myself that I was being humble, but really I was staying small because it felt safer. Jen Sincero has said, if you're serious about creating wealth, you have to stop pretending that you don't care about it. That line forced me to confront how often I hid behind irony or jokes instead of my own desires. One of the most helpful concepts in this book is the idea that money is not moral. It's neutral. It's not proof of goodness or badness. It's a tool. The emotional charge that we attach to it comes from our own beliefs, not the currency itself. When I started separating money from my worth, everything shifted. I could look at my finances without spiraling. I could make decisions without shame. I could acknowledge where I wanted growth without feeling like I was betraying some imaginary moral code. And it isn't always like that. Again, this new apartment I'm moving into is more expensive. I do feel a little bit guilty about it because it's putting me in a situation in which I know I'll be fine. I know I have the income, but it makes me nervous because I'm like, do I actually need this? Do I actually deserve this? When I book a trip, I'm going to Japan in February. I booked it and I instantly felt guilty. I think I called my friend Natalie, my best friend, and was like, I feel weird. I'm anxious. Like I feel guilty that I'm taking 2 weeks off of work and that I'm treating myself to a ski vacation. Like everyone else is like, fuck that. No, go enjoy yourself. You deserve it. Even the people I train and work for, they're like, you deserve this. You work 12-hour days. But there's something that I have been taught and something that I am unlearning that makes me feel guilty. So it's not always fucking peaches and cream. That's not the saying. It's not always butterflies and roses or rainbows or whatever. There's times when I still feel guilty about money. From a psychological perspective, this ties into identity-based behavior. We act in alignment with who we believe we are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles financially, you'll unconsciously reinforce that identity. Sincero encourages readers to adopt a new self image, someone who is capable and deserving and open to abundance. That's not about pretending, it's about choosing a narrative that supports growth. She said in interviews, "You don't get what you want, you get what you believe you're worth." And that idea alone reframed how I approach opportunities. I started implementing what I learned in very practical ways. I stopped underpricing my work out of fear of being too much. I stopped apologizing for invoices. I stopped treating money conversations like something shameful or awkward, or I tried to. I did just ask for a raise from every single solitary person and marketing client that I work with. It was scary, but it went well. Okay, we'll just leave that there. I also became more intentional about where my money went. Instead of seeing spending as loss, I started seeing it as circulation. That reduced a lot of anxiety. Money stopped feeling like something that disappeared and started feeling like something that moved. We literally work so we can make money so that we can spend it, so we can treat ourselves to a trip, to an ice cream maker, to a massage, or to save for a condo or a house or whatever else you want to treat yourself to. This book also forced me to look at scarcity thinking. Scarcity doesn't just show up in bank accounts, it shows up in decision making. It shows up in settling, overworking, and saying yes out of fear. When you believe resources are limited, you cling. When you believe they're expandable, you plan. Jen Sincero talks a lot about trusting yourself to figure things out. She has said, "Trusting yourself is the fastest way to grow." That trust was something I realized I'd been outsourcing to circumstances instead of cultivating internally. And now, honestly, I trust the fuck out of myself. I know what I'm doing. I'm a badass bitch. I'm a badass at making money, and I hope to continue that way. There is also a strong behavioral component to this book. It's not just mindset, it's action. Sincero emphasizes taking bold, sometimes uncomfortable steps that align with the identity that you are building. For me, that meant pitching myself more confidently, saying no to work that drained me, and saying yes to opportunities that scared me. Not reckless yeses, but intentional ones. The kind that expand your sense of what is possible. I stopped working on Mondays because I wanted Mondays to then be a podcast-focused day. I cut my day on Friday to a half day, and hopefully we'll cut Friday out, so then I will just have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, and I will only work those 3 days a week, a gazillion hours those 3 days, but I will have the other days to work on my passion projects like my art and the pod. One thing that I really appreciate about You're a Badass at Making Money is that it doesn't shame you for where you are. It doesn't pretend that mindset alone fixes everything. It acknowledges fear while refusing to let it be the decision maker. Psychologically, this works because it reframes fear as information and not instruction. Fear doesn't disappear when you grow. It just changes shape. The difference is whether you let it drive. I don't even want you being a passenger princess, let alone driving the car. Fear, get out of the car on the side of the road. Kick it out. I also noticed how this book complemented The Secret in a bit of a more grounded way, where The Secret encourages visualization and expectation. You're a Badass at Making Money anchors those ideas in tangible behavior. It asks, what would someone who believes in abundance do next? And then it nudges you to do that thing. Over time, those actions reinforce the belief. That feedback loop is powerful. Of course, this book, just like any other, is not perfect. There are moments where it leans heavily on personal responsibility and doesn't fully address systemic barriers. That's a valid critique. But what it does extremely well is help you stop internalizing struggle as identity. It reminds you that wanting more doesn't make you ungrateful, it makes you honest. When I look at how these 3 books work together, it becomes clear why they landed for me in the same year and why I just feel like they all fit together so well. The Let Them theory helped me stop managing other people. The Secret helped me stop predicting failure. You're a Badass at Making Money helped me stop playing small out of fear. And together they created space to choose differently, space to trust myself, space to believe that ease and alignment and abundance aren't things that you stumble into accidentally. They are things that you allow. What I ultimately took away from this book specifically is that money isn't just about income. It's about permission. Permission to want, permission to receive, permission to grow without apologizing. And once I gave myself that permission, everything else started to feel a little less heavy and a lot more possible. And quite frankly, a lot of things just kind of fell into place. And I say fell into place, I did the hard work behind the scenes, but things started happening. And if there's one thing that I hope that you take away from this episode, it's not that you need to read these exact books or adopt every idea that they present. It's that awareness is powerful, and small shifts in how you think, how you react, and how you show up can create real change over time. None of these books asked me to become a different person. They asked me to stop fighting what was already happening and start choosing myself more intentionally. And that's exactly kind of what I said in the last episode. New year, same me, but with clarity. Letting people be who they are doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. Shifting your mindset doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means not letting fear narrate your future. And wanting more, financially, creatively, emotionally, doesn't make you shallow or ungrateful. It makes you honest. And listen, let's be real. I still have my off days. I still spiral sometimes. I still catch myself wanting to control outcomes or downplay my desires. But now I notice it sooner. I then pause, I redirect, and that alone has changed how I move through the world. Growth is not about perfection, it's about awareness and choice. If this episode resonated with you, send it to a friend who's in their overthinking era, or their I don't want to care, but I do era, or their I want more, but I feel weird admitting it kind of era. And if you've read any of these books, I would love to know what stuck with you and what didn't, because that conversation is way more interesting than pretending one size fits all. So feel free to head to my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, and you can drop me a line if you want to comment on anything I said regarding these books, or slide in my DMs on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. And as always, thank you for listening to Hot Air. Be kind to yourself. Trust what you notice, and remember, you do not have to grip so tightly for things to work out. Sometimes the most powerful move is letting go and choosing what comes next. And with that, I will see you next Tuesday.